Canada first gained a sizable Chinese population in 1858 when the gold rush drew miners from California to the Fraser River. The first Chinese community in Canada was formed in Barkerville. A small temporary Chinese community also sprang up here in Victoria, near the foot of Johnson Street. By 1880, thousands of Chinese began arriving to work on the Trans-Canada Railroad. In 1885, the Canadian government began charging new arrivals a $50 head tax. Once the railway was completed, that head tax jumped to $500. Within a few years, Victoria's Chinatown moved a couple of blocks north. More permanent buildings were constructed, and it became the largest Chinese settlement in Canada. The Victoria Chinese Public School opened on Fiskard Street in 1906, with youngsters attending during the day and their parents at night. The segregated school had its own soccer team and other sporting activities, which grew in popularity until our public schools were opened to everyone in the 1930s. Chinatown remained close-knit through the war years, and it was only the odd basket man or vegetable cart or truck that ventured out into the wider community. City kids might go within a block of Chinatown to attend the Rio or York movie houses and maybe a little closer to buy firecrackers at Halloween. The Victoria Chinese Students Athletic Club story began in 1927 when a touring basketball team from the Philippines visited Victoria and played a game against a local senior team. A group of boys attended that game, and the enthusiasm generated by what they'd seen made them decide that basketball was a sport in which they wanted to take part. They set out barrel hoops in a vacant store on Government Street and began to develop their shooting skills and other basketball techniques. Realizing that they really needed better facilities, they chipped in to purchase regulation basketball hoops and got permission to erect them on the grounds of the Chinese school. When winter arrived, the boys began attending church in order to be allowed to practice in the church hall. Albert Marr, affectionately known as the General, was persuaded to manage the boys. Because he knew little of the game, he approached the local YMCA for help. Fred Harding volunteered to coach them, and in the fall of 1931, the first Chinese team joined the Victoria Basketball Club League. That original team's roster, composed of Albert Kwan, Wallace and Walter Lee, Peter, Raymond, George and Bill Lowe, Harry Fong and Philip Nip, went on to win a city championship in their very first season. And that resulted in the formation of the Chinese Students Athletic Club, which went on to win the 1936 City and Vancouver Island intermediate titles. Their 1937 Intermediate A team was coached by Ollie Goldsmith and contained only 4 originals, with Roy and George Nye, Charlie Nip, Herbert and Alan Chan signing on. By then, the club, which raised funds from an annual dance, also had members playing on local soccer, softball and table tennis teams. In 1942, they entered Intermediate A and B basketball leagues when games were being played at the Willows Sports Centre and the YMCA gym. Their annual matchups against Chinese teams from Vancouver were a highlight. Their 1944 Senior League team won both the city and provincial championships. By the next season, the Chinese students had 4 teams playing in the senior and intermediate leagues. Duncan Lee led them in scoring and was recruited by the re-established Dominoes as part of their bid for another Canadian championship. The 1947-48 Senior B League had 5 teams and claimed both the city and Vancouver Island titles. Local police officer and lacrosse goalie Bill Andrews coached the Chinese students to a win over a Vancouver Chinese team, which earned them a berth as Canada's rep team at the American Oriental Tournament in Seattle. Tennis courts were built through donations from Chinese citizens and were well used by enthusiastic club members. The opening of Memorial Arena, together with the growing popularity of minor hockey, saw the Chinese students' focus on basketball shift to softball. This 1945 boys ball team was the beginning of a very popular Chinese student senior softball franchise. Pitcher Jimmy Chan joined the all-Chinese squad in 1949, and they won their opening game at the Central Park Senior A League. Then, veteran chucker Stan Tenning signed on, and the team downed Brentwood Aces in the semifinals before losing out to Timber Service. New, larger bleachers were built in the offseason, but even they weren't enough to hold the 1950 opening day crowd. Gar Taylor and Don Robinson had joined the mostly Chinese students team, which lost the opener and spent the season in second place behind the league and playoff winners Douglas Tyer. Taylor took over as coach and signed infielder Jim Morrison, but they still fell short in a 3-team pennant race with Butler Aces and Pitzer Necks. In 1952, Bernie Sam and Eddie Liu were added, and after a poor start, Tenning's arm took the Chinese students team into a 5-game playoff before the BC Forest squad claimed the title. Veteran players Walter Bung Durr and Jimmy John took over as manager and coach the following season and began a rebuilding program. By the mid-50s, interest in playing on the almost all Chinese teams waned. Younger athletes who previously competed to play for the students' teams were being picked to join school teams, and the ball team folded. In 1978, this midget boys basketball team won the city championships, the last to proudly wear the VCSAA colors. The Victoria Chinese Students Athletic Club was created in an era when members of different cultures kept largely to themselves, but the skillful play and excellent sportsmanship of the Chinese players was instrumental in getting Victorians to embrace different cultures. For their historic role in helping build Victoria's multicultural sporting legacy, we are honored to induct into the Greater Victoria Sports Hall of Fame the Victoria Chinese Students Athletic Club.